Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. How did you find the paper? Yesterday test paper? Yes? Was that difficult or easy or moderate? Yes, students? Yes, students? You can reply. It's individual decision. You can take a decision and tell me whether what is the paper, how did you find? It's an easy going or a difficult one or a moderate? You could attend all the questions? You could attend all the questions, students? What's your reply?
Good, ma'am. It was good only.
Good. Aditi Sharma, good. Then who else? Who else?
It was good only, ma'am.
It was good only. Fine. 1 second, students. Students, make a note of this topic, today's discussion. Can you see the view the screen? Yes? Today we'll be discussing about friction. Correct? Please make a note in your book. Take down. Dear students, yeah, what's the title of the discussion today? We are talking about friction. In that, we'll be discussing about types of friction, laws of dry friction, limiting friction, concept of static, dynamic friction, and some numerical problems. Okay, this is the content of module 2. Still we are in module 2 students in the second part. Okay, can you listen me? Can you hear me students?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes. Now, in a better way to understand what is friction. Array, I don't know what is friction. How to understand? I have catched up with a small video, students. A small video. It's something like a small video. You can watch this. Maybe this is not audible. Let me check. I'll play. You can tell me whether it is audible or not, students. Okay. This is telling what is the friction and what are the types of friction. Is it
No,
audible, students?
no, ma'am.
Okay. Please have a view. Then I'll explain. It's telling about. So you can see here the boy has just slided. How it is possible to slide? How it is possible to slide? When both the surfaces are smooth, then only it is possible to slide. You can see the boy similarly he continues to slide on the surface. How it is possible to slide, students? How it is possible to slide? When both the surfaces are smooth. Both the surface means your shoe surface and the surface on which you are playing. F stands for friction, right? Here again you can see he is having a wavy nature. He is not easy to slide down. Did you observe, students? Did you make an observation? He is not able to slide that comfortably. What is the difference you find between those two? The earlier had a smooth surface and the rare one had a rough surface. So which resisted him to slide? Which resisted him to slide? Isn't it? You can see that very easily sliding. Not discomfort is being found. So that is a friction. So overall to have a friction there should be a rough surface. If rough surface is not there, friction does not exist. Is that clear, students? With a small video, I am making the concept very clear to you. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now, before going to the titles, I thought I'll put this picture in your mind so that you can easily analyze, understand. Now, coming forward, what is the types of friction? Right? So, we have different types. First one, for example, rolling friction. How this rolling friction will have? A rolling friction is possible only with the rounded balls. When it rolls on the surface, a rough surface, then only it is possible to develop a rolling friction. What is a dry friction? To understand what is a dry friction, you can see here. See the picture of the dry friction. A person is moving the table. So there's a purely a dry friction. But when it comes to a stop position, it will be static. And similarly, fluid friction. There is a friction. How does a person swim? It is possible only when there is a friction developed between the fluid and the surface. So it is named as fluid friction. See, continues to possible to swim because of fluid friction being developed there. Otherwise, it is not possible. So these are the different types of frictions what you have to understand and what is the friction you come across in your daily life, students. It is nothing other than it is not you are walking, you are sitting only. It is because of friction. Correct now, students? Is that correct? Only because of friction you are able to walk, you are able to sit, you are able to do some work. Okay, let us understand what are the uses. You can see that is what I was telling. A vehicle movement is possible. You are able to walk. I am able to walk. All it is because of surface giving the friction. A person is able to drill. A boy is able to slide. So different ways you can see the friction is acting, students. Friction is a small word but contributes a lot of energy. Lot of energy. Correct? Did you follow? Did you follow, students? Something you got? Something you understood? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Yes. Now, this is only for your understanding. I have taken this video is very much available, students. It's very much available. You can always look into it. Now, let us go to the syllabus. This is your syllabus, correct now, students? Now, from this part, no, students, you get 10 marks, question marks. It's for purely 10 marks you get from friction. From equilibrium of forces, you get 10 marks, correct? And friction, you find another 10 marks. So totally one question is module 2 is of 20 marks. So this friction has telling what is the definition of friction, types of friction, laws of dry friction, limiting friction. They are all the definition, students. And concept of static and dynamic friction and numerical problems. Okay. Now further to understand, I'll go to your regular chapter. Correct. Now this is a friction. You can see the one image here. What is this image all about? This image is all about what? You can say here. What is this image is telling? It is describing two bodies. Let us take you're at home, right? You're at home, students. You pick one stone here at your nearby place, and let somebody will pick one stone, right? One stone and one stone, which is having curves, which is having very much curves. Is that easy to rub the surfaces of stones? Is that easy to rub the surfaces of the stone when it is rough in surface? Having a rough surface. This is having a rough surface, even it is having a rough surface. When I am starting to rub the surfaces, what happens? It is not possible to move, make a movement. Yes or no? Yes or no, students? Now you remember your grandma places at your village, when you used to visit, there was a grinding stone at home. I have at my grandma place, I have this grinding stone. Do you have a grinding stone like this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, they prepare the batter. How it rubs, how does it grind, students? Because of rubbing action, because of surface. Both are at rough surface. So you find friction is developed. Due to this friction, you find the force being developed. Which force is developed? Resisting force is being developed. So when two bodies with undulations mean with rough surfaces, tend to move each other or each other, the tufts and crust, tuff and you find the undulations, tuff and crust of one of the surface will have to overcome those with the other. And hence, in the initial stages, a large force is required to move the body. Yes or no? I am asking you. Okay, you take one stone, you take another stone, you rub on each and make the surface smooth. Is it possible to do it at initial stages, students? You have two
No.
stones. Yes, it requires much of energy to rub. Correct now? So it is telling at initial stages a large number of forces is required to move the bodies. It will not allow it too easy to move the body related to the other surface. This resistance offered towards a motion at the surface is known as frictional force or simply as friction. Simply as friction. Frictional force or friction. Now, can anybody tell me what is a friction or frictional force? What is a friction or a frictional force? How do you define? Yes? Yes, students, how do you
Just
define?
resistance offered to motion at the surfaces of the bodies.
Yes, the resistance offered to the motion at the surface of the body is known as a frictional force or a friction force. Example, they'll ask define friction. So if you did give that answer, that is very nice, very complete answer. But you should always give a answer with an example. Example, rubbing of what?
Two, two
Yes,
stones of
rough
undulation.
surface, isn't it? Rough surface, two stones, rubbing of two stones which is having rough surface, a figure that can be drawn, okay? Is that clear to you all? So how do you define a friction? It's a resistance force offered against motion on the surface of the body is called as friction or frictional force. Is that clear to you, students? It is very easy to simple to understand. You are resisting the force against easy movement. Okay. What about others in the class? 20 students are there today. How? What happened? What happened, students? What about remaining? Huh? Remaining, what happened? What happened to remaining students? So in the now we have understood what is friction. Now I'll come by one according to the syllabus, students. Is that okay? I'll follow the syllabus. Types of friction. What are the different types of friction you saw in the video? What are the different types of friction you saw in the video, students?
Static friction and dry friction.
Yes, you saw static friction, dry friction, then fluid friction also. I didn't give any lecture on that, but that video was running. So depending upon the state of rest or motion, okay, whether the body is rest or in motion, which is very important to state this. We identify into two parts of friction, that is static friction and dynamic friction. Again you find this static dynamic friction is divided into sliding friction and rolling friction. Okay, did you follow? At first, to understand, a friction is divided into two parts, correct? One is static friction and dynamic friction. In dynamic friction, again you find two types, sliding and rolling. Rolling you saw in the video, students. I'll play once again the rolling friction. Saw the rolling? How it was rolling? How it was sliding? Right? Now, to understand one by one, let us go one by one. First, static friction. What is static friction? When the person is at rest, right? What force of resistance will be offered by the body? Now I'm sitting and giving a talk here, taking up the class. I'm sitting here on the chair, right? We are all working from college, students. From today onwards, we are all working from college. You are all aware of it? We are all aware of it? We are all working from college. Okay. Now I'm sitting on chair. So I'm still at static. But how I am sitting on chair? Why I am not falling down? You may say, madam, gravity, madam. Due to center of gravity, it is possible to do it. But how? What is that happening? What is that holding me? It is a friction. It is a friction because the surfaces of the body and the chair is coming into picture, which is not allowing me to fall. So it is a friction experienced between two bodies when both are at rest. So what are the divisions of friction, students? Tell me loudly. Class, full class should talk now. 20 students are there. Full class. What are the types of friction? On what basis they are being defined? Full class.
Static friction. Friction, ma'am.
On what basis you define them? Depending on
State of
state
rest.
of rest or motion, you have two classification. How about dynamic friction? How they are divided? How they are divided?
Sliding
And rolling friction, ma'am.
Rolling friction, very good. What about others? They are all sleeping at 2:32 after having a good lunch.
No, ma'am.
Huh?
No, ma'am.
No, then reply. Pavan. What about Pavan, Syed, Saida, Charan, Preetam? Very quiet in the class. Okay. Now what is static friction? What happens in the static friction, students? What happens in the static friction? What is the condition of body in static friction? The body should be at rest. For to develop static friction, the body has to be at rest. Okay. Now coming to dynamic friction. To understand, it is a friction experienced between two bodies when one body moves over the other body. Means what, students? Means what? It is under moving condition. Dynamic, it is under moving condition. That is what you saw that video where the boy was sliding on the slider. Correct? It is a friction experience between two bodies when the body moves for the other. But there are two types. What are they? What are the types? Tell me, students.
sliding and rolling friction, ma'am.
Yes, sliding
Friction,
and
ma'am.
rolling friction. What is the condition of static friction? What is the condition of body for the static friction and dynamic friction? When the dynamic friction will take place, when the static friction will take place?
When static is when both the bodies are at rest.
Yes, body is at rest. Correct. Somebody is there. And what about dynamic? What about dynamic?
Either body is at rest and one is moving, ma'am.
Yes, it should be in some one, either one of the body has to be in motion. Correct. Not at rest. Correct. Sliding friction, they are divided into two types. What is that? You find sliding friction and you find rolling friction. It is a resistance offered or the resisting force which opposes the sliding motion of one body over the another body. This force acts in the direction opposite to the direction of the impending motion. What is impending motion? The direction of the motion. The direction of your motion is the impending motion. What is the sliding friction? It is a resistance. It is again a force. Friction is nothing but not a big word, students. It is a force only. It's a force. It's a force which opposes the sliding motion of one body over the other body. This force acts in a direction opposite, not in the same direction of the motion, but it will try to resist, means it should be opposite in the impending motion. Similarly, what is rolling friction? It is a friction between the two bodies when one body rolls over the other body. It is a friction. You can see a surface here, you can see a ball here. When this ball is rolling on the surface, a friction is developed based on the surface of contact. Okay, let me not go there. Now tell me, students, what is a dynamic friction? How they are divided into? Quickly. Now Pawan Kumar MV will tell me. Pawan Kumar MV. Student Pawan Kumar MV. What are the categories of dynamic friction? Geeta?
Static friction and rolling friction, ma'am. Sliding friction and rolling friction.
Rolling friction, very good. What is sliding friction? How did
Twisting friction opposes
It is
sliding
the
one of the body over another body.
Yes, it should be in opposite It's a force. It is the resisting force. And rolling friction, what is the rolling friction? What is the rolling friction? Anybody in the class? Karuna? Karuna? What is rolling friction?
The friction between the two bodies when one body rolls over the another.
Yes, very much. Correct. Good. Now, based on the surface also, students, now we understood the friction based on the type of what to say, like whether it was a rest or with us under motion, isn't it? Based on these two conditions, bodies are rest or bodies are under motion, we understood types of friction. But there is one more category based on the surface of contact. Based on the surface of contact, there are two types of friction. Correct? Now, to understand, based on the, you understand, students, there are two types of frictions based on one is at rest or motion. We defined one category of friction. Again, we have division of friction with the surface of contact. Correct? Now, dry friction. If the contact surface between the two bodies are dry, then the friction between the two such bodies is known as dry friction. Very simple, no? It should be dry, that's all. There should not be any wet condition. Then only the surfaces between, all you can see, most of the cases you can see that all the frictions are undergoing dry friction. So suppose in the video you saw that boy is sliding on the slider, it's a dry friction. If he is sliding on a wooden plank, it is a dry friction. But the boy who is swimming is not a dry friction. It is a fluid friction. So, fluid friction, the friction between the two fluid layers or friction between a solid and a fluid is known as a fluid friction. What is a fluid friction? It's a friction developed between the fluid phase, because when you say a fluid means it has got number of layers, students, number of layers. But though it may appear as one single layer, but it has number of layers. That is what mechanical students, they learn fluid dynamics. Am I correct? Students from mechanical engineering, you study with fluid mechanics, there you come across with a layer definition concept. Okay, to be more clear, friction which develops between the solid and fluid is known as a fluid friction. Is known as a fluid friction. Is that clear to you, students? I'll repeat once again. Based on the type of surface, you have two types: dry friction and fluid friction. Okay, and dry friction is called to be dry friction when the two surfaces are dry in state, whereas fluid friction when the friction between the solid and the fluid. Okay, okay, students. Now, can you tell me, students, what are the types of friction in general? I'm waiting for your
Dynamic
answers.
static, ma'am.
Then.
In dynamic, rolling friction and sliding friction. And based on the surface which is in contact, we have dry friction and fluid friction.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else? I'll skip this. Oh, I'm looking for that video, students. It has gone. Yes. Now I think this will be more clear to you. Am I correct? Am I correct, students? It is all available with you on Google also. See how the boy slide. What is possible? He is sliding on two surfaces. He is sliding very easily, smooth surface. But again, it is a dry friction. But he is sliding. So when he is able to slide, there's no friction developed. Okay. Now the next picture is, I'll clear this. He's again easily sliding on the ice surface or a smooth surface. He can do it very easily. But when it is a wooden plank, he is not able to slide on a rough surface. He is not able to slide. What is that not allowing to slide? Because of the frictional force. The surface is resisting to him, resisting a force. Okay, see how it is resisting? So there we define the friction. So friction is developed between two surfaces. It's a force. Now this is the rolling friction. You can see how the ball is easily rolled. How it is easily rolled? Because it is having contact with the surface. What is a dry friction? You can see a man is pushing the table on the surface. You can see the video will come up. See, he's pushing. It's a dry friction. Kinetic friction is a force that acts between two moving surfaces. And static friction is a force that keeps an object at rest. And this is a fluid friction, which occurs when object move across or through a fluid. Okay, students, is this clear to you all? Is that clear to you all, students? Any doubt here? Any doubt here?
No, ma'am.
No, fine. Maybe in the next week or another 15 days, we all will be meeting the classroom students. So be prepared. Okay. Now, next coming up, laws of dry friction, limiting friction, concept of static and dynamic friction, and numericals. Okay. Now let me understand what is laws of dry friction. I'll step by step I'm going, students, so that I follow the content. Laws of dry friction. Yes. Actually, we understand not in specific, we call it as laws of friction. Okay, students? Because all friction what we are coming across in this chapter, it is all in dry in condition. Why dry in condition, students? Why it is dry in condition? Both the surfaces are dry in state. They are in dry in state. So that is a reason. Now, to understand what is a dry friction, they are being divided into two categories: the laws of static friction and laws of dynamic friction. What is static friction, students? The body is at rest. The body is at rest. In dynamic friction, the body is in motion. Did you get the difference? Okay. Now, what are the laws? There will be always a laws. Why we frame a laws? Because that will give us a solution for the problems following those laws. Now, what is the first law? We'll understand. The force of friction always acts in a direction opposite to which the body tends to move. Correct? Now, for example, there is a car movement. You saw one car movement on the road. If the car is moving in this direction, right, the friction will be generated in the opposite direction. The opposite direction. That is what it is being told as force of friction always act in a direction opposite in the motion of the body. The magnitude of the force of friction. Arey Baba, what is this value? What should be taken? Is a worry to do here. That is what we have to analyze, students. Now, I have drawn this body is moving in this direction. So, my friction will be in the opposite. But what is the value of this friction? The magnitude of force of friction is exactly equal to the applied force which moves the body. Correct? Now tell me what is the friction force F value here, students, according to the law? The magnitude of force of friction is F, if I say, is exactly equal to the applied force which moves the body. Now tell me what is the value of F? Is equal to what? Applied force. Equal to what now? F in this diagram. In this diagram, students.
F is equal to W, ma'am.
Very good. F is equal to W. That is nothing but to pull this transport or anything like car or cargo, anything, I have to apply one force as W. But whenever you see it is easy to pull anything, no, this is very difficulty. What is that difficulty? Now, what is the difficulty, students? It is the resisting force which is called as frictional force. It is called as a frictional force. Correct? So here F is equal to W. You are correct. Very good. F is equal to W. Okay? So that is the second law of the dry friction, of the dry static friction. So what is the first law telling? Telling that force of dry friction is always in the opposite direction of the motion of the body. But what is the value of that force of friction? It is the value which is equal to the force applied. Now let us understand more in what are the laws of friction. What is the third law stating? The magnitude of limiting friction bears a constant. Arey Baba, it is taking constant value to the normal reaction between the two surfaces. Oh, what is this? We are coming into the reactions and all. Okay. Now, very clear. It is very clear. The statement is very clear, students. Nothing to worry. Very clear. Telling that, I'll erase this part. Okay. Now, the magnitude of limiting friction. Limiting friction, you may ask, there's an adjective. You see adjective? Adjective word is included along with friction. Yes or no, Baba? Students? Students, limiting friction bears a constant ratio to the normal reaction. How it is possible, madam? Where this limiting friction came, where this normal reaction came and all that. Okay, fine. I'll draw one, I think I have to take one page working sheet where I can draw it very clearly. Not even 30 seconds, students. I'll open this working sheet because the space is not there much. Okay. I'll increase the width. Now, fine. Okay. Okay, students. Yes. Now, what the third law is telling, it is telling that the magnitude of limiting friction, limiting friction which has been limited, bears a constant ratio to the normal reaction. Normal reaction means what, students? Now, this is a surface. Now, I'll draw this is a surface. Correct? Correct now, students? And on this, I'll keep a block. You think your books are being kept. Your books. Okay now, students? Okay? How the weight will act? W. Okay? It has to be in equilibrium. It has to be in equilibrium. To maintain equilibrium, there should be an opposite force. Correct? Operative force as normal reaction. This is what the statement is telling. Normal reaction. Means W is the load taking up by the ground opposite direction. Then only it is possible to make the books to stand here. You're getting? Now, under static friction also, it is a static friction. Now, there is a friction developed. Let me change the color and indicate. This is a friction F. Static friction F. Correct? Friction, no? At every contact surface, you find the friction. Now, as per the principle, the magnitude of limiting friction bears a constant ratio to the normal reaction. So that is what is this telling? F divided by the N is equal to constant. What is F here? What is F, students? They're telling F divided. Yes, limiting friction. In this diagram, what is F, students? What is F? This is F. Yeah, isn't it? This is F. And this is a normal reaction N. Normal reaction N. Both the forces, see, one is acting vertical, one is acting horizontal. See the direction of force. Students, you are following. See the direction of force. We are correlating the forces. We are bringing the relationship between the forces. Both are forces, but we are getting the correlation. So which is called as a constant. It is a value, the ratio of friction force divided by the normal reaction gives a constant. This is what being told in the third. That is, F is the limiting friction and N is the normal reaction. Now, what is the fourth one? The force of friction is independent of the area of contact between the two surfaces. Independent force of friction. Force of friction F. Now, this F, no, it is independent of the area. Array, how much ever area you take, I don't, but friction force will act, that's all. Even it is 1 centimeter square area or it is for 100 centimeter square area, Baba, I'll act. At no point I'll act. Correct now? Frictional force is irrespective of the area. Irrespective of the area. Correct now, students? It doesn't bother. Wherever two surfaces come into contact, there is a friction always developed. The force of friction depends upon the roughness of the surface in the contact. See how beautifully it has been told. It is negligible about the area, but it is more concerned about what? About what, students? More concerned about what? Roughness of the area. Roughness of the surface. Can now anybody tell me what are the laws of static friction? There are 5 laws of static friction. Tell me now one by one. I'll call your name 1 second. Don't worry, I'll call your names. Saida, Tripana, Pavan, Rishika. Yeah, Pavan, tell me. What are the laws of static friction? You can look to the screen and tell me. Not in detail, one by one, whatever you have understood. The force of friction always act in the opposite direction. Then, what is the value of force of friction? Rishika? Rishika? Pramok?
Yes, ma'am.
Pramok, tell me. What is second principle? What is the second principle of laws of static friction?
Magnitude of the force of friction is exactly equal to the applied force.
Very good, very good. Then Karuna, what is the third law of friction? Law of static friction? Karuna. Harini?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Harini, what is the third law?
The magnitude of the limiting friction bears a constant ratio to the normal reaction between the two surfaces in contact. F by N is equals to constant.
Very good. Then fourth one, Charan S. Charan S.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell me the fourth limiting friction. Sorry.
The force,
This.
yes, ma'am. The force of friction is independent of the area of contact between the two surfaces.
Very good. Aditi?
Yes, ma'am.
Last fifth one.
The force of friction depends upon the roughness of the surface and contact.
Yes, very good. So, is that clear? What you learned today? Everybody in the class, what did you learn today? What did you learn?
Ma'am, friction, types of friction based on motion and based on the surface of contact.
Then, very good. Then, what was the last topic of discussion?
Laws of static friction.
Yes, laws of static friction. In that, did we study only static friction or anything else? Yes?
It is related to dry friction, ma'am.
Yes, correct. Okay, what's the date today? What's the date?
1st July, ma'am.
It's July month. When are your exams, video examinations? Any idea?
September, ma'am.
Yes, then how far? How many days left? How many days left or months left? 2 months, huh? Or before that, you may start also, okay? So, very sincerely, you start your preparations. Don't be idle. Don't think that VTU will not conduct exams. Now, things are getting segregated as before because vaccination has come up and everyone are being vaccinated. And our college has that provision of getting vaccination. You all know about that, the students. Vaccination is provided at our college till 10th. Yes, students, you are
Yes.
all. Yes, you please take that opportunity and come and get here only in our college campus only. It has been done. Okay. I think the circular is shared by our class teacher, Madam Ramani Madam, and you please go through that accordingly. You can register. Fine. Now, please answer your attendance and you can leave the meeting immediately after your attendance. Atiti,
Present, ma'am.
Nitya,
Present, ma'am.
Nitya, Likit, Charan S,
Yes, ma'am.
Dhruti,
Present,
Geeta,
ma'am.
Present, ma'am.
Dhanashri, Karuna, Kishan, Mohit, Pratik Chandra, Karthik P, Pavan P, Pranav.
Present, ma'am.
Pranav is present. What about Pavan? Akash, Shekha Rajesh,
Present, ma'am.
Present, ma'am.
Yes, there was some network fall. Rishika, Rajesh, Rishi, Rishika S,
Present, ma'am.
Rohit,
Present, ma'am.
Saida,
Present, ma'am.
Prana,
Present, ma'am. Ma'am, say the present, ma'am.
Vasant, Vimala,
Present, ma'am.
Abhishek,
Present, ma'am.
Arvind also, Bharat,
Present, ma'am. Present,
Ketan
ma'am.
M, Dhruva, Harini,
Present, ma'am.
Manish, Mohit, Mokshagna, Nitish, Pawan Kumar,
Present, ma'am.
Prashant Raj, Pritam Nayak, Vamshi, Vikas,
Present, ma'am.
Vinay, Ashish, Chandu J, Taran K, Gulam, Gurumurthy, Prajwal, Pramukh, Sunil, Shafahat, Darshan. Okay, thank you.